Well, good morning. Welcome to our, huh? Okay. I can see it. I'm sorry. I was kind of watching it. Well, good morning. Welcome to our morning Bible class. If you want to go ahead and open up your Bibles, turn to Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, around verse 24, where we're going to pick up this morning. Get my stuff. Okay. I do have my social media comments up, so if you're joining us live on YouTube, you can go ahead and chime in and contribute to the class. We'd love to hear from you if you have questions, comments, concerns, and we'd love to be able to help us be a part of this class and make it more dynamic. We can learn a lot by sharing our knowledge and our comments. So Mark 7, 24 is the text where we're going to start. All right, so let's go ahead and have prayer, and then we'll get started the class. Our most blessed and righteous Father, again, we are so blessed to be able to be here this morning to study your word, to take a moment out of our busy lives that seem to distract us away from your great love and salvation and glorious things that we see around us. We thank you for the blessings that we continue to receive undeservingly. We're hopeful that we would be more grateful as we live this life. Father, as we begin this class this morning, we hope that our hearts and minds would be open and clear from the thoughts that have been occupying us, and that we can listen to the words and have a conversation, a discussion that would edify us and shape our spirits more into the spirit of your Son. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so last week we looked at the traditions of the Pharisees, and that's where Mark had moving from there to this one now, which is a very deep subject. I mean, we spent a lot of time on it and looking at that, and I think that that's so important because of all the different issues we struggle with today. One, and foremost, I think that sometimes we fail to look at these texts and understand that even though they're Pharisaical, they had all these customs and all these traditions and all these things, we just seem to, well, that was over 2,000 years ago. You know, we don't do that. We don't have Koban. Koban was something so Jewish, and so, but, I hope last week's conversation was showing how we have a modern Koban and the way that we have, and I had that list of the different ways that we do that. And so I hope that as we continue through, as we've done in this book of Mark, is really start to pull what it means for me, how it can help me, whether you're a saved Christian or not. There's a lot of depth, and it's structured in a way that's meaningful, that I'm trying to thread through so as we go through this. So as he goes from that confrontation, we see him moving into an area that is not really Jewish and becomes kind of an area that, should he even be there? And that's what we're going to look at. So let's go ahead and read. We're going to read 24 through 26, and then we'll talk some more, discuss. And from there he arose, and he went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered the house and did not want anyone to know. Yet he could not be hidden. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast out a demon out of her daughter. So we have the setting, right? I always love maps. To me, I'm always trying to figure out geographically, where these places are, especially when we look at it. So I got this map for us to kind of look at and see where Tyre and Sidon is. And then if you look in the bottom of the box there, that's kind of a back out, kind of an explosion of looking at the whole area, way north from Jerusalem in that area. And so they're very significant cities. Tyre and Sidon, we know, had a very complicated relationship, if you could say, with the Jews, going all the way back to King David. King David, the king at that time when David was alive, was Hiram. And he had a good relationship with him. And the Phoenicians are kind of the people of that area. They're considered very seagoing. Some actually believe that they were the sea people that are kind of mysterious around the 1300 BC that came in and nobody knows where they came from and kind of triggered the collapse, what they call the Bronze Age, early Bronze Age collapse of societies. Many of the Hittites go away, but these sea people, they just don't know where they came from. Some link them to Carthage in that region there, or Greece or somewhere. But the Phoenicians are that population of people that are up in the north. They definitely are paganistic. Baal and all the other Ashtaroths and that type of gods. They're not the Philistines. Kind of keep them separate. The Philistines were a much nastier culture and a much more vicious relationship that they had, going all the way back to, again, David and Goliath, right? And Saul, when Saul was killed, it was a battle with the Philistines. So, but the Phoenicians were more cultured, but the city of Tyre was extremely important in the kind of one of the major ports. We would kind of look at it maybe like, the port of New York or LA, even Houston, where everybody in that region, all the way into Africa, the Orient, get their goods from. We see a lot of the prophets talking about this type of an attitude of arrogance that they end up developing because they were so rich and because they were so powerful. They developed this, we're kind of bulletproof until, and even, they were able to resist most invasions, the Phoenicians. Babylon couldn't take out Tyre. And so they got this arrogance because they thought, we're in, they had a little island out in the area of the bay. And so they had built this fortification, the city, the main part of the city, so they could just evacuate to it. Nobody could touch them. Until this guy named Alexander the Great came. And his principle was surrender, submit, we're good. Don't, you're going to die badly. And they did not surrender. And they died badly. They thought, you'll never get to us. And so he took every stone from the city of Tyre and started pouring it into the water and building a bridge out to it. And that's where it fits the prophecies, saying that this day would come where there would be nothing but a place for laying out fishermen's nets, that it would be totally desolated. And he did. And he ended up crucifying nearly 2,000 people. So complex, it's still at this time of Jesus' day, an important port. So it has a lot of significance in that. When you look at the boundaries, kind of like when we look at America, we look at the states, and say, that's, New Mexico, we say Southwest. If I say Southwest, we're not talking about Florida. We have those kind of geographic imprints on our minds. This is kind of the imprint that if you were, living in that day and age, would be the boundaries in a way that you see. So in that green upper area there, where there's Tyre and Sidon. That's why they call it a Syrophoenician, Syrophoenician. Sy being Syria, Phoenician. So she's a Phoenician, but she's living in an area that's considered Syria. But if you'll notice, that's a Roman province. So you say, wait, aren't they in the Roman Empire? Yeah, everything actually in that area. It's interesting because when you have an area that's declared kind of a Roman area like this one, the control is more governmental driven by Romans. Whereas a lot of the areas in the Roman Empire, they would allow the local governments and nations to have some autonomy as long as you kept giving taxes to Caesar and you were not causing trouble. So that's why you have these areas. The Tetrarchy of Philip, that's one of the sons of Herod that ruled in the north, the one that John the Baptist had got his head cut off of because Herod had married his brother's wife, Philip. So this is kind of just a little things to kind of look at. But that's all. I mean, you got any comments, or do you think that's helpful? Does it help us? Now, like I said, we're, as far as distance, he's probably over our, 80 miles or so easily away from Jerusalem. This is not just, he gets up and shows up there, and it's fascinating because why would he go that far north? Is he going forward? And it says, what does it say right away is the idea that he wants to get away. Why? There's nothing he did that was ever without some other objective. Even though there's a personal side where he would want to go pray and he would want to isolate, you'd find that, for example, what we saw before the confrontation with the Pharisees, Mark had recorded the story where after they fed the 5,000, and then he went up to pray. He wanted to be by himself. But at the same time, then all of a sudden we see while he's away from them, the storm that hit. And while they were on the boat, and then he comes walking out. But this is kind of the dynamic part, I think, of the who Christ was. In reflecting that there was a part of that physical body in which he dwelt, the flesh, that did shape, him. And there's times where he felt like we did. We know if he's 100% human, that you just get tired of being around crowds and stuff. And maybe he thought that by going that far north, nobody would know him, right?
He'd already gathered crowds of 3,000, 5,000, and it's just like, well, and of course he went there to go and teach, but maybe someplace new, it would be smaller groups until everybody found out in that region that Jesus was here now. He was the one that was healing.
Absolutely. That's what I mean. The journey was twofold, I think. It was to one, just depressurize, kind of decompress and go to a place, but also there was the lesson that he was going to bring forward. The hardest concept, I'll qualify that everyone was having was this idea of what is this kingdom, right? What is this kingdom thing? He sent them out, remember? Part of the message, well, go back to the beginning. John the Baptist was preaching about it. Then Jesus comes, and then we'll see when we get to the Gospel of Luke, it says, when they're trying to refrain him and keep him in one city, hey, there's a lot more work here to do. He said, no, I have to go to preach the kingdom of God, for that is my purpose. That always would blow me away. It was like, wait a minute. You came to save me. You came to die. Show me God in the flesh. Salvation, redemption, But when that verse in Luke, when he says, that is my purpose. Doesn't that make you feel like, wow. But the two are inseparable. See? That's the most important thing that kind of soaked through to me, is that The two are inseparable. You cannot have the kingdom and have salvation. That's how imperative it was. So salvation and the sacrifice and everything he was going to do on the cross were the same. You can't have one without the other. Right? Okay, so let me get on my little hobby horse about the church and the kingdom and premillennialism, and the kingdom hasn't come. And somehow the church is a substitute, a fancy kind of substitute, because the Jews had rejected him. Whoa, to me, what did I say? He said, my purpose has come for this kingdom. So salvation to me and that sacrifice on the cross are the same. They're interlinked. He cannot die on the cross and then ascend to heaven and not have the kingdom. We know he's referred as being ruling and stuff. So, but that's what I mean. Coming back, I'll get off that for a hobby horse because it drives me crazy. We come back to this idea that the complexity that they listened to the prophets, but it was like looking through a veil, right? You kind of look through. I love the description. Of course, I made it up, so I guess that's why I like it. It's like having a jigsaw puzzle, but somebody took the lid, and all you got is the pieces. Now, you can put it together, right? But you're going to take a long time, and you're not going to know, is it a barn that's red with a bunch of cows? Or is it a red bridge? It's got some water next to it. But over time, as you start, you group them. I hate jigsaw puzzles. I don't do that. But I've watched my wife do them. She loves them, and you group them together, right? You start grouping things and you go, oh, okay, all the red ones come together. And when I put them together, I see wood. I start to see, that's the way the prophets were. They were like they had, God had given them all the pieces in a way, and they're like putting them together. And they're seeing what they want to see, and they're seeing different things. And so this idea of him going north, and again, the difficulty of them grasping the reach of this kingdom, because they want a physical kingdom that has the honor and dignity of a David, right? That's what they want. And so by him going outside of Jews was offensive. And they could justify it like they did Koban by saying, well, we're not supposed to intermingle with those people. That's what God told us all along. You're not supposed to intermarry. You're not supposed to, and of course they did it anyway. But then they got to the point where the phrase dusting off your feet. What was that? That was when you traveled from a Gentile country and you hit the borders, like hitting the Border Patrol checkpoint when you're coming into Mexico or somewhere on the state line, you stop, you got that nasty Texas dirt off you before you come on into New Mexico. Oh, sorry, did you do that? We laughed, but that was kind of that was the idea that that's how they viewed anybody who wasn't a Jew. Where's he at? He's up in the heart of some of the most vile places, It's like, why would you go up there? And so this lesson is much for his disciples. What about today? So let's stretch this and try to figure out how can we then look at this concept and have any type of way of looking at it today in the church. And there's a part that's dangerous. I'm not going to try to go that direction. But what I mean is, there's a part where we have to understand we are living in a world that is paganistic. It's ungodly. We have to live in it. And the only way people are going to receive the gospel is by us not isolating and being so self-righteous. Is it, how do they see the excellencies of God, like Peter said? It's through the fruit of what we're doing, the resultant of what what we're doing in among those who are unbelievers, those that we don't think are justified, are worthy. The most wicked people that you would think that you can imagine that just turned your stomach. See, because that's what the Syrophoenician woman and those people would be to the Jews, would be something that would turn their stomach and think there is no way that they could be a part of Abraham. And so in some ways, we have to be careful in understanding that it is meant for all. The gospel is for everyone. We don't compromise, when we're living in this foreign world. I'm not saying that at all. But sometimes we can become so isolated in a spiritual way that we don't want to. And you can get fatigue as well, living in a world like this where you just want to withdraw. But then we got to remember the gospel is for all, and the door is always open. It's always available. And so in this is what we see. Now, some of the key points, we kind of already talked a lot about this, the setup here, is his attempt for privacy. Because that's what, Mark says, that he arose and he wanted no one to know. He wanted what it said, yet he could not be hidden. So who's he traveling with? We don't know how many followed him per se, but probably we can feel comfortable in saying his disciples, at least the 12, that he had chosen, are with him, which would create a stir. I mean, if you think about it, if you were an Anglo and you had like 12 or 15 people and you traveled down to Juarez, you'd stand out. I mean, even though even like in El Paso, we have, cultural crossovers. But if you had a group of 12 people that were walking along, not that they would be threatened, but you would stand out that you were an American or you were not from that city. So just them going there in a lot of ways, we know that their accents as well. Because remember, we can, later on when we see the apostles standing before the council, they pick up, there's an accent, there's a Galilean accent. So there's no way that he could just go up there and necessarily fit right in. The person in the house he's staying. So, but there's something that jumps that's even larger is, who is he to them? Who is he to them? And now look at the reverse side of it. If you were a Syrophoenician and those guys down south, those Jews, what did you think about them? Hotty totties, right? They got the one God, they're like, and so you would have a prejudice against them as well, and probably rightfully so. Now, the one thing about pagan is that people who were paganistic, they believed in a lot of gods. So it's not such a reach that they would somebody like this woman would reach out and say, I'm so desperate at this point. But she heard it. How'd she hear it? And then she believed it, right? That's one of the things. And so he then says to her, let's read 27 and 30. And he said to her, let the children be first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to dogs. But she answered him, yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And he said to her, for this statement, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter. And she went home and she found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. So the idea of, again, one, she's a foreigner. She is got the courage to approach him. And also, again, think about kind of the way that women were looked at. I mean, and I always ask sometimes, where's the husbands? I love the faith of these women. We've seen this, and that's the beautiful thing that, a lot of times women are so much more spiritually in tune than us guys. I had an old preacher one time tell me years ago, this is sarcasm, okay? He said, one of the reasons the Lord put men in charge is because if the women are in charge, the men would do nothing. Because women are more in tune, and a lot of times. It was a bigger context. But I thought of that a lot, and I thought, yeah, you know what? And I think that's the problem we see in churches today in our country, right? Women leading, taking over, and men who's supposed to be leading, and because, I'm going to say it, we are different. Men are logical. We're a little harder emotionally. We don't make our decisions with emotional considerations. We're looking at the facts. We make a plan and we execute, and we make mistakes. And the problem is, though, sometimes we don't take into consideration the emotional side, the tender side, the graceful side per se, but it's the order that God has established, and it's useful and it's functional. And when men won't stand up and lead, then the women will. And so, anyway, I know I kind of popped a can of worms on that, but I think of this when I see these great women of faith going all the way to Deborah, where she's having to tell Barak, what? Didn't he tell you to go? I'll go if you go. And then what does God do? Gives the glory to a woman. So, there's that. But I love this, that she's a foreign woman that's considered by a Jew less valuable, period, because she's Syrophoenician and she's a woman. Go ahead. Sorry.
And she didn't ask someone else, well, if you know him, you go ask him for me. She went up straight and knelt down and asked him herself.
Mm-hmm. So doesn't it take courage?
He could reject her.
Did she not have courage? I mean, we already know kind of the conversation, but let's just start with the act of her making a conscious decision and saying, this guy's in town, and they're saying he could do this. This also shows the love of a mother, right? The love of a mother that will do anything for her child. That is, and not risking humiliation, embarrassment, not worrying about the cultural stigmatism might come on her. Do you know what she did? After Jesus leaves and her child is fine, saying she had a Jew, she went and talked to a Jew and he healed her daughter. There's the positive side of that too, though, right? The influence that's going to be left behind. But to approach Jesus took a lot of courage. Faith takes courage. It takes courage. It's one thing to logically come to a conclusion, but to not act on it is cowardness. It's coward. You've heard me talk about that, what my grandpa did to me, and we got on the roof and we're hanging off there and we're screaming because we're going to die. We're dead kids hanging, and he walked out and he just stood there and he said, let go. And he's looking at me eyeball to eyeball. I think he was 12 feet tall. I don't know how he did it. We're like 100 feet off the ground, going to die. That's my mindset as a kid. And we're hanging there. And he just walked up and looked at him. And he said, let go. And I'm like, no, grab me first, right? Let me feel your hands around me. Then I'll let go. And he would not do it. And I thought, well, okay, I guess he just wants me to die. This is the way I did it, because he told me not to get up here. And I let go, and the next thing I know, I felt it. Those big monster hands, right? When you're a little kid. It takes courage. God tells us something. And you say, okay. And you don't do it. You don't do it. And this faith is powerful. Cultural stigmatism, all the things she had, but the love for her child as well, though. So that's where I see this, is us understanding as well. We are living in a world that doesn't accept our faith, ridicules us, drives us down. Every aspect about, like we talked about women and men roles, two sexes only, focusing on what marriage really is before God, not before the society, worrying about YouTube strikes. Somebody asked me that, on one of our meetings, said, well, you ever got any YouTube strikes? Because, I will say I'm against homosexuality. I believe that a man and a woman, and that's the way it's meant and all, I don't care. I don't care. One, we're not monetized. So even if they gave me a strike, this just means they're going to take away your monetary. We're not making any money, so I don't care. Plus, we're a little fish in a pond. But that's the thing, But you know what? It has caused me to think about it. Because I don't know who all is going to watch this morning or 10 years from now or a week from now. And so this was where I had to apply that lesson to me and saying, I'm no longer preaching in these walls. This is out there for anybody that has a hashtag Church of Christ, hashtag faith, because I put them in there and they'll find it. And I did years ago. I had to kind of go, I don't care, but this morning as I was going over this, I thought about the courage that it takes to be faithful, right? And it's a real one. And so I love that conversation. Once she approaches him humbly. Jesus, it almost sounds like, why would he talk to her like that? I mean, that to me is a fascinating, when he says that, let the children be fed first. So who are the children? And how would she know what he's talking about? It's like, I'm not here about food. I'm not here at a food bank. So let the children be fed first. It's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now, I don't know how much she understood and grasped all around it, but she got the superficial main points and understood, okay, he's telling me, at least I'm not a child, and I should not be asking for this bread. But she turns it. But you know what? Even the dogs are allowed to eat the bread crumbs that come off the table. So what is Jesus talking about? What do you think? Who are these?
The nourishment from the Jews.
The children are then who? The children are the Jews? Abraham's seed?
The nourishment is for all the crumbs are for all the Gentiles and everybody else?
Yes, that's the absolute application. The children are of the blessing. But what's interesting is, what does that mean about him then? He's the bread, right? And that's a theme, isn't it? It's a theme in there, the bread of life, that I am the bread of life, which then as you tie it together, it goes all the way to the prophecies. You could bring all those back, and there's that puzzle you got with all those little pieces scattered out. They're coming together. And it's starting to become more and more and more clear that everything the prophets had talked about, including the fact of where he's at and what he said right here, goes all the way back to the conversation that Abraham had with God. Through your seed, which is Messiah, all nations will be blessed. This is a part of this demonstration. Now, we know that even the disciples are probably sitting there slightly offended, right, by this woman that's a Syrophoenician. How dare her? They had that. They had a little bit of that, maybe not as much, maybe not, some didn't. But we very clearly know that even Peter himself couldn't grasp the concept of this blessing to all people, right? Cornelius in his house, when Peter goes up there and he travels up, but he was in Joppa, and he had those visions about the Lord opening it up and all these unclean food. And the God, finally said, look, what I declare is clean is clean. What was he talking about? He wasn't talking about food. He was talking about what I declare was a bigger vision. And even then, when a man shows up at his house at Joppa to come and get him, what does Peter go? Whoa, what are you here for? God told him, wait, there's a guy down there, go with him. Then, okay, and then he takes a journey. It's not like he jumped in his car and like 30 minutes later, he pops at Cornelius' house. He's walking with these other messengers that are taking him there. There had to be some conversation. We don't know what it is, but even then, he gets inside his house. We know that Cornelius is a righteous man. He's a good man. But even when he gets in his house, Peter has the audacity to say, what? What do you want? Do you know how illegal it is for a Jew to be inside a Gentile's house? This is the guy that said, the kingdom was good. He confessed him. So we struggle, another current application for us. With all the knowledge we have, many times we have to be careful because we can be like a Peter, who in one moment we're confessing Jesus Christ is the Son of God and have this beautiful insight. And in the very moment, turn around and go, well, what do you want? You know how illegal it is for me to hang out with a homosexual? Or I should be talking to you, or I should be with you, or, the struggle there. So I know but the persistence that she just didn't get up, even in her humility, she pursued, right? She pursued. Okay, so when you get an answer like this from Jesus, when you're reading the Bible and you're sitting there searching for something and you run across it, I'm using, figurative language, you run across where something like this, well, the bread is for the children, and you're reading the scripture, and whatever it might be you're seeking in Psalms or something, some struggle in your life, and you read something and you sit there and look at it, don't keep searching, pursue it. Don't give up. Keep asking. Maybe, that's, sometimes I've done that. It's like, okay, you know what, Lord, I know I'm not worthy. Just, I'd take a breadcrumb right now from you. Don't give up. Don't give up on that. And so I think her humility, when we look at that test of faith she had, the lesson as well was one that the disciples, I think years later, after the Lord is done and gone and they're out there on their own, they're sitting around talking about this.
I'd say, could you believe she said that back?
Yeah.
To me, it's almost like she's back talking. Yeah, but let me tell you about this.
And then the guilt they would feel like after Jesus was crucified, resurrected, and ascended, and they're out there traveling through Asia, and all of a sudden I could just see them sitting around going, looking at all the Gentiles coming to Christ. And then going, you remember that time we were in Sidon and that woman came up and how we felt about her? And look at the thousands of Christians just taking Christ. And that's the lesson sometimes for us. We have to look back, and I think kind of grab those lessons. All right, real quick, we'll just throw these up. And then we got to wrap it up. Overall, the faith that approaches in humility, persistence, is what is rewarded. And again, there's nothing that the Lord can't accomplish, over unclean spirits. And the mercy that the Lord is extending to everyone, not just Christians, not just the saved, but his mercy is there for everyone. And that idea of that faith has to trust what he said and don't have the fear of it. All right, any closing comments, thoughts, concerns, complaints? All right, well, I enjoyed the class this morning. If you want, read on. We're going to look at Jesus heals the deaf man and some of the lessons there. And they're still up in that same region there. So if you got questions, concerns, or anything, and you're watching this in the future, drop it in the comments. I respond to them and enjoy listening to them. So with 10:45, we have worship, 4 p.m. this afternoon, and our midweek is at 6 p.m., and we're doing the survey of judges. So Until then, God bless.